Welcome to Strange Familiars. Allison,
Yes,
how are you tonight?
I'm doing well.
That's good to know. You've brought us another story,
Yeah,
which I'm super excited about
me too, wasn't it?
because that means I don't have to do the story. No, seriously, I know a little bit about this one. I don't know. I just know the very basics. You told me you were working on it. I was excited about it. It has a York connection. You want to just give a little intro here at the beginning of the show, what we're going to be talking about, and then I have some thank yous to do, but then we'll get back to it. Do you want to just give a hint of what's coming up?
Oh, we were talking about a decadent poet from the turn of the century who's sort of akin to Poe, Lovecraft, all the great weird fiction writers, and has a connection here to our hometown.
Ooh, very exciting. All right, I'm excited to get to that. But before we get to that, we have some thank yous. Ando B, thank you so much. He gave very generous donation. He donates somewhat regularly, so thank you. That's a huge help. That's another way you can help. We do have a paypal.me link. It should be in the show notes of every episode. If you click that, you can make a one-time donation. That's a massive help, as well as becoming a patron and everything else. So thank you so much. We also got these really cool... So Mike F. sent us these pendants he made out of old hobo coins.
I didn't even know what hobo coins were, but now it's kind of like circus giant rings and stuff like that. You're just like, oh, well, now I need to collect those.
Yeah, he was kind of like, hobos are kind of like hermits. I was like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
They sure are. They're cousins, right?
Yeah, they're hermit adjacent.
Yeah. And he found these two. So the hobo coins were basically, they would take old nickels. Mm-hmm. And I think these are like the 20s and 30s, right? And they would carve them. They would carve artwork into these nickels. He found these two. He said he did not carve them, so he found them. I don't know where he found them.
But they look like they have the Strange Familiars logo on them.
They look very much like the Strange Familiars tree. It's super cool.
And it even has a little part in the center that almost looks like the eye.
Yeah, he found one for each of us somehow.
Yeah, and they're different. Like I was looking at the branches of the tree. They're not the same.
They're not.
Somebody must have carved it.
Yeah. So I don't know if these were actually carved back in the olden days when hobos were carving hobo coins, or if they're some new carving that he, someone did it recently and that he found or something. But he said he did not carve them. He found them like that. So that is super cool. That's really, really neat. So thank you so much, Mike. He also sent us some coins with a Bigfoot and I guess a gnome-looking guy on it that say Strange Familiars on them. Those are really cool too. I love those as well, but I really, really like the hobo necklaces. Mm-hmm. Those are super cool. So thank you so much, Mike. That is a great, great thing. And one more thing before we get to your story, Allison.
What's that?
I'd like to thank our patrons. Thank you so much, patrons. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for your help. We could not and would not make Strange Familiars without your help. If you like what we do, and you'd like to help us make Strange Familiars and get more content besides, you can become a patron at Patreon. It's patreon.com/strangefamiliars. All of our patrons get commercial-free versions of the weekly shows, plus extra episodes every month. We do at least one exclusive episode for our patrons every month. Once again, it's patreon.com/strangefamiliars, or if you're on Apple Podcasts, they have a program there called Patron of the Strange, and subscribers on Apple Podcasts also get the commercial-free weekly episodes and the exclusive episodes monthly. And of course, wherever you're a patron, thank you so much. It's a huge help. I had never heard of this story before. I'd never heard of this person before.
We should have.
Right. There's a lot of crossover to our other interests with this guy.
Yeah, and this book was actually this author's sole book that he wrote was re-released in the 1990s by Dertro, which is like David Tibet of Current 93's press, which is something that at that time we would have been incredibly into. And I don't know why we didn't Well, they were always really super expensive.
Yes,
We probably
some
just
of those
didn't have
books
the money.
were pretty expensive.
But it somehow, if we noticed it at the time, it also like just went off our radar. So like to me, this was an entirely new and fresh thing, and I did not know that this was a Dertro related thing.
Mm-hmm. He just did a reprint of the book.
He did just do a reprint of the book, and honestly, I would say if you're going to look after we do the show, if you're interested in it, there is a reproduction by Hippocampus Press, which has people who are like have become scholars on him basically. Mm-hmm. And they collect not only just the poems, the original poems from the turn of the century, but they also add biographical information and all of his unpublished works, critical theories on the works themselves and how they relate to, broader topics and stuff. So that is what I would, and it's also so much cheaper. Like you're not like at this point, a 30-year-old Dertro book is like $300-400. So mm-hmm. It's like.
So this is called the Book of Jade.
Yeah.
That's you're referencing.
So I found out about this because in my other life, I have another life beyond Strange Familiars where I work in sort of a historical context, I would say, which deals largely with like Victorian topics and photography, and then it relates also to the African American experience within our area. Mm-hmm. So I was doing research on someone related to a project that I'm working on for work. So I found myself like on the Gettysburg College archives looking for this person whose last name is Barnitz. And I came to this section where there was a research paper done on the Barnitz family of York, and it says, inspired by a letter sent in 1834 from David Greer Barnitz, the first valedictorian of Pennsylvania College, later renamed Gettysburg College, to his sister. This letter introduced the researcher to a conflicting legacy of the Barnitz family through biographical vignettes of David Greer Barnitz, his father Charles Augustus, his cousin Samuel Bacon, and a second cousin, David Park Barnitz, the author of the Book of Jade, a collection of disturbing poetry published in 1901. And I was like, okay, well, now I'm not... Now I have to know who this person is. And I kind of like, for the rest of the week, dropped the person I was originally looking for.
So you took off your hat for that job and you put on your Strange Familiar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then I mean, I'll be honest, then I worked on this during the time I was supposed to be working on my...
Well, you've worked on stuff for them during Strange Familiar's time.
Absolutely.
So it evens out.
Yeah, it evens out. So I switch Barnitzes, if that is a thing you can possibly say. And I kind of dove into finding out about him. Mm-hmm. And what's fascinating is that while he didn't grow up in York, his father did. And the Barnitz family has a pretty long legacy in York with extended family members that were very influential from the colonial through, even now it's a pretty common family name in this area. And at one point, you'll probably play this because I insisted that we go to the cemetery to see his relatives who were buried here. He is not buried in York, but his father's first wife and some of his siblings are buried in York at our favorite cemetery, Prospect Hill.
Yes, which we visited on site in episode 2.
Was that the last time we were there?
For the show.
Well,
obviously, you and I have been there since then.
Yeah. Was that when we were talking about the whistling...
The singing corpse guy.
The singing corpse, yeah.
Yeah, and we were trying to figure out, based on the article in the newspaper, where he was standing and stuff like that.
I love that episode because you got our friend Martin Bates from Eyeless and Gaza to sing...
Nearer My God to Thee.
Nearer My God to Thee. And Martin Bates is one of my absolute favorite singers. I love Eyeless and Gaza.
Super talented singer.
Unfortunately, right now, I cannot wear any T-shirts that say Eyeless and Gaza.
Yeah, because of what's going on.
Because of what's going on. The band name was named after the Aldous Huxley book, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't have anything to do with the current conflict.
He is a super nice person. Everything I've ever reached out to ask him to do, he's done for me. Like, no questions asked. I think I asked him to sing that Nearer My God to Thee, and he might have gotten it back to me within a week, maybe less than that.
He's one of those people I feel like who could sing the phone book, and I would be like, okay, I'll get the gatefold. I'll get the
yeah. He has a project where it's called Murder Ballads with
Scorn.
fellow from Scorn, right?
Yeah.
And So it's like real, like kind of drony music, but he's just singing these traditional murder ballads over. He's got Eyeless and Gaza, he's got solo albums, and super talented musician. We got lucky enough to meet him. He played one of the festivals we played out in Seattle.
Just really like this completely unsung 80s.
Should be way more popular than he is. Super talented, like just amazing, creative, experimental music, but also beautiful. Like how you can combine like really experimental stuff and it still ends up being like super beautiful.
Yeah, and it like really runs the gamut from like that early like synth pop stuff that he did that like I love to like him picking up a banjo way before it was fashionable. And I would say you picked up a banjo way before it was fashionable. And he's doing crazy things with it, like in a way that just are...
Yeah, I can't say enough nice things about Martin. Just super, super nice guy. When we had distribution for our record label, we used to be his distribution in the United States. When I lost my distribution, he lost his distribution through me. And it really, like, I'm almost sadder for him. He should be well known, and
there's times they were so incredibly close. Like I think it was 1986. Eyeless and Gaza was the opening act for Depeche Mode's tour. Like,
oh really?
Yeah, like they had so many times. They were on the like this really famous Cherry Red compilation with like the Marine Girls and all these other like famous bands at the time, and they really should have been incredibly popular. His music is so. It's so personal and intimate in a way that you just don't, that just doesn't happen in other ways. So like this, I didn't want this to end up being like an unsolicited, like Eyeless and Gaza.
Yeah.
But I almost want to swear, like I fuck that band. It is one of my favorite bands of all time. And
he did something for me that was based on someone else we talked about, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley's Frankenstein, and just like one long piece of music for a project I had done years and years ago where I got artists to do little mini CDs each full moon. So like the full Hunter's Moon was one band, and there's a name for every full moon of the year. And he did one of those for me, and he just comes up with this thing based on Frankenstein, and it's gorgeous. I don't think it's ever been released otherwise. I should probably dig that out and
like at least just let people hear it.
Yeah.
His Bandcamp, we should just list it.
I'll try to remember to put that in the show notes.
Yeah, if you have any interest in like 80s experimental music or something, and he's like so involved in like all these different scenes, and like the mail art scene, he was like friends with John Balance from Coil, right? Like they were.
Well, I know he was associated with all that. Yeah.
Yeah, he was like just in the, both in it and in the periphery of like all the music that we grew up on and really love. So. I don't know how we got...
Well, one of the few times, and I often say to people, don't meet your heroes. One of the few times that proved to be incorrect. It was great to meet him. Totally down to earth. I remember, because we were allowed to be backstage, because Stone Breath was part of this festival as well, so we knew he was there, and we walked back, and no one was talking to him. And we went back to meet him. He was just sitting there alone with
his wife, Elizabeth.
It was his wife, okay. We went back to meet him, and it was this really kind of cool, powerful moment. I think he appreciated that too, because we were specifically there. Like, no, I'm here to meet you.
Yeah. I mean, and I just really can't underscore how much he should have been.
I agree.
Wildly famous.
I agree.
I think maybe he's just too unique, too intimate, too beautiful to be appreciated. And
it's definitely unique music. I mean, so,
And I remember, I think it was Bjork who said that Martin Bates' voice was one of her favorite voices ever. So if you don't want to take our word for it,
take Bjork's word for it.
Yeah,
there you go.
I feel like also has pretty good taste.
And I don't know how we made this left turn into Martin Bates, but
we should have done a whole episode on him. But anyway, what we're doing is talking about, I would say, a comparatively beautiful, dark, decadent poet.
There you go. Is there a definition of what like the decadent writers were? Like,
there isn't. I wanted to get our friend Sarada on here, but I kind of ran out of time because like she's like the master of knowing about.
Yeah, she would have been great for that.
Gothic and decadent poetry.
Literature.
I mean, primarily it's a European phenomenon. So the fact that we have this example of an American decadent poet is sort of, that's part of his genius.
Mm-hmm. Who are the well-known names that we would know in decadent poets?
Okay, let me tell you that. So probably the most notable would probably be Rimbaud or Baudelaire. And actually the book is dedicated to the memory of Charles Baudelaire, which is like it's checking every box for proto-goths. And it's like...
Connecting this to, so this would have been a Patron episode, but we can connect this. There was another decadent author named Count Stenbach, and I don't think he was really a count. He just,
But and there's also, this is part of like, this is growing out of like sort of Oscar Wilde, the aesthetic movement, and these sort of like dandies who are like, love the exoticism of like foreign lands. And so they talk a lot about what would have been at the time called Orientalism, which is like sort of that fantasy version of what the Middle East looked like, and fantasy versions of what everything in the world is.
So Count Stenbach is the one who gave me what I feel is the more traditional title to the ballad that I call The Witch Mother, because in one of his writings he talks about the Ballad of the Witch Mother, and he describes this ballad. Today, that is more popularly known as Willie's Lady or King Willie, because that's the title Martin Carthy used. But ever since reading that, I always called it The Witch Mother because that's a way better title for it, and more accurate title to that song. So we did, for one of our Patron episodes when we were doing the Supernatural Ballads, which I'm not finished, I just have to do more of those episodes eventually. We did do the Ballad of the Witch Mother.
I love that one because that's the one that actually talks about it. Like it has a spell within the confines
it tells
of the song.
you how to do a spell.
How to do the spell,
and if on that Patron episode, we had Barb from 6 Degrees of John Keel on, and she did research, and she said, like, this, to the best of her knowledge, is an accurate spell. Like, whatever that was, it's, like, accurate to spellcraft. It's really, really cool. Sorry to throw you off topic, Allison.
No, that's fine, because Stenbach and Verlaine and Aubrey Beardsley. So there's, like, these sort of, like, tragic... sort of...
What's that dark Victoriana thing, which is your absolute favorite? Like that is your aesthetic.
Yeah, I like before they came up with this sort of like dark academia thing. Like that's always been the thing that I gravitated to.
Yeah.
And then I also like it when it's merged with like 60s psychedelia. So like it's just something about like the right kind of incense, I think. Just
well, some of those 60s posters, which are using like Art Nouveau artwork. Just really
like subverting like the turn of the century artwork into this like psychedelic version of it, which is like
it's great stuff.
And the thing is, I like all the music that's influenced by so I like like 60s Baroque pop music, but then I also have a like any dark 80s kind of thing is like my thing too. So on that front. So, but what appeals to me is that like this family, and he's not the only member that sort of meets with this sort of troubled ending, but it manifests in different ways. And so he's the son of a local reverend from York. His father is incredibly devout from a young age. And this is where I feel like this story encapsulates like what happens when you suppress that sort of darkness that's bubbling up inside of you. And so he came from a family that had some wealth, and then through a bunch of deaths ended up where he and his mother were pretty poor. But he was really devoted to his studies, really devoted to a religious background from a very early age. And in the late 1840s, this was at a time where, like, if you were poor, that didn't mean that someone gave you any kind of handout to go to school. It just meant you didn't go to school and you weren't able to buy your books.
Right.
So he picked up bones on the streets of York and filled up containers of them to buy his books. Is there anything more goth than that?
This guy's after my own heart here.
Yeah, right.
Like,
so this is
what do I do but pick up bones from York?
Yeah, exactly. So, but I mean, like, but that's for a child, that's such soul crushing work. Like to really just be picking up the detritus of the dead that no one else wants.
Yeah.
To just try to get an education and try to better your.
That'll turn you into a Gothic poet, right?
Well, that'll turn your kid into a Gothic poet because you choose to go the other way.
Yeah.
So.
So that was his dad picking up the bones.
That was his dad picking up the bones.
Okay.
So this is like the 1840s when his dad was a kid.
Okay, gotcha.
And I really felt like it's that steadfast determination and that Pennsylvania German work ethic that echoes his sort of pragmatic religiosity later on. And he just puts everything into God. And so when his fears about himself and his health bubble up, he turns to God for solace. They both share a lot in that he and his son are both incredibly intelligent, go to school at a young age. And so his dad enters what is now known as Gettysburg College, and he is immediately successful in school. But then something happens, which in his biography, they relate to his uncle's business going under that makes him so sad he has to come home from school. But that seems like...
Yeah.
I would find it hard to believe that you couldn't carry on with your studies because your uncle's business is going under.
Yeah, that's odd.
I think that's an excuse for the fact that he's probably in a depressive episode.
Oh, okay. Sure.
He refers to this period of time in his life as his darkest hour. It arrives with what it kind of alludes to as being like a melancholy of the mind. And he has to come home and rest from it. But there's always...
This is still the father
This is still the father, Samuel. So he returns home to recuperate from both his weakened mental and physical...
So home to York.
Yeah, he comes home. But battles his way back, gets back to school, puts the demons that are in his mind somewhere else, and he becomes the Reverend Barnitz and is transferred to Wheeling, West Virginia. But he marries a girl from York, and they get married in York. 2 children are born to this marriage, but after the 3rd child, both the child and the mother die. He's so distraught, he publishes this private press memorial to hand out to people, which... This is part that stabs me in the heart now. I had one of these like a couple years ago and I sold it, but it didn't...
Wow, just not knowing who it was.
I didn't know who it was. I just knew it was like sort of a touching private... But, I collect memorial stuff, but I'm like, I can't keep everything, blah, 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 blah. And every time I do that, I'm like, why don't I keep everything? So that is somewhere out in York, and if you have it, I'd like to buy it back if you do.
Yeah, or you'll find it again.
Or I'll find it again. That's true, yeah. His dad's life has not been easy. Now he's lost a son that's named after him, and he's lost his young wife.
Not the young wife.
Yeah, well, they're always young back these days. I think she's in her early 30s when she passes away, but they are the ones that are buried in Prospect Hill Cemetery. So maybe, would you like to go with me to Prospect Hill Cemetery?
Yes, let's go right now. Doodly, 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 doodly. Here we are in Prospect Hill Cemetery, home of the singing corpse from way back in episode 2.
Oh, and a super gigantic hole right there. What is that?
That's a groundhog hole.
Yeah, but you could... That's almost a hermit house.
That's a groundhog. We haven't been here since episode 2, I don't think.
I mean, we've personally been here. But...
Yeah, but I mean, as far as for the podcast, we were close by for Barnett's Cannibals.
Yep.
But not here. Why are we here, Allison?
We're here to visit the graves of the relatives of tonight's episode, which is about David Park Barnitz, he's the son of a local York reverend who became sort of like a decadent poet of the late 1800s, early 1900s. And this is his half-brother and his father's first wife and his half-sister are buried here. And I believe that's one of their kids too. Like one of the next generation is over there. They got a pretty good spot here. This is prime real estate in Prospect Hill Cemetery.
Prospect Hill Cemetery, in case anyone who doesn't want to go back and listen, is this stunningly beautiful Victorian cemetery in York, Pennsylvania. Part of, do you remember what they called the Victorian graveyard? It was like, they called it a certain movement to basically...
Oh, they're just the rural cemetery movement?
And just to make beautiful cemeteries.
Yeah, this is a place to have a picnic on a Sunday afternoon. They certainly have some great real estate here.
Oh yeah, it's just a gorgeous cemetery.
There's a definite possibility that there's going to be a groundhog popping out of here.
Yeah, we saw him run down there earlier. He's having a day.
There's another feather.
Oh yeah, That's a nice one.
What's that from?
Some sort of hawk or something.
A big bird.
Yeah.
What's this little thing? Piece of metal or something that came off of maybe the inside of one of the markers. Now, I very briefly worked here, and I was told that most of the metal that surrounded the individual plots was taken during the First World War, First or Second World War, to use as scrap for the war effort. So all the bars that would have been connecting these are all gone.
You can see where they would have gone.
Yeah, so I think
Wow.
maybe this is part of the metal. Maybe
Yeah, probably.
came off of something. Look, there's even like a little
I know. Yeah, like a little design in it.
design on it.
Yeah.
What is that? Well, I'm not gonna take it. I just have to find a place to put it. I imagine it's just sort of bubbled up, maybe from
Yeah.
not from any
Put it
rain
at the
we
base of
had.
that tree over there.
Oh, here, maybe I'll just put it on top of this. You taking the feather?
I'm going to place the feather by the tree.
So, as we probably get to mention when we do the proper part of the episode, is that maybe 2 years ago I had this private press memorial for a woman who died that her husband published, and it's her. It would have been David Park Barnitz's father's first wife, and I sold it because of course I didn't know I was.
Oh, you had like a memorial? Like,
Yeah, I sold it.
like one of the cards.
No, it was a whole booklet, remember? And it was all like a
I do not
memorial to
remember.
her. It was like a big...
Oh,
I didn't
wow.
have it very long, and it sold right away. Because
Wow.
now I'm kind of kicking myself about that.
Well,
What you gonna do? You can't keep everything.
exactly. So his father's not here, or his father?
No, his father is buried in Iowa where they lived.
Okay.
So only his half-brother who died... It's the reason why the first wife died. She died shortly after the baby was born. And then, and this is his half-sister.
And where was his mother?
His mother was, she's buried in Iowa, I believe, as well.
Okay. Okay, so he would have been a product of the second.
The second marriage, yeah.
Okay. All right,
and so
gotcha.
he grew up. He was born in West Virginia, and then moved to Iowa. Died in Iowa and is buried there. But these are his family members, including his sister. And here we are with a great view of Prospect. I love the cemetery. Like,
Oh, I know.
it's like everything you want in a cemetery.
I know.
Amazing Victorian sculpture with just the right amount of stuff growing on it, and like look at that view down there with the ones with the
Yeah. Beautiful. Let me
Yeah.
take a couple pictures. We've been in, what's the one? There's the one in Richmond. That's gorgeous.
such something about cherry.
Their Victorian cemetery is
Yeah.
gorgeous, and the one in Providence
Swan Point, yeah, that's one of my
is
favorites.
gorgeous.
Yeah, I think this like for a small town version of that. I mean, this is humongous. It's sprawling.
Yeah,
It's not a small cemetery by any stretch of the imagination.
but it's smaller than those
But
by
it's
far.
smaller
Yeah.
than those, yeah.
Say that again.
You wouldn't want to go to another downtown cemetery while we're out here, would you?
Sure. What other cemetery are we going to, Allison?
It's downtown. I have to look it up.
And why?
And just regular
I wonder if my hollyhocks are still growing on William Woodruff's grave that I gorilla planted there.
You need somebody to go out and look. Anybody lives nearby?
Maybe I'll have to drive up there again.
No, we're going to cemetery with you.
I know. I feel young again.
I know. now that we're back from our trip to Prospect Hill Cemetery,
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to talk about what happens when he picks up the pieces and is able to carry on again. So he marries for a second time, and the family moves to Des Moines, Iowa. And 2 sons are born to that marriage, and they are Frederick and David Park Barnitz, the latter being the subject. And so at this point, he is a very active member of the Lutheran Church, his father.
Mm-hmm.
And he has gone a huge amount of time. He's a very devoted father, but he's not around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But something of, I think, of that personality gets stuck in his son in a way that just manifests in a totally different way.
Look, I can see this in our own kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like to say that both of our kids are 50% you and 50% me, but in entirely different ways for each of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, they have their own personality, obviously. They have their own interests and stuff. But you can see...
which parts come from.
Yeah, you can see that like, it comes through like that.
But I think in the way that you react to it or the way that it plays out, especially like, I don't know, I'd have to talk to someone personally who grew up with like a religious background that came from a parent who was also a practicing religious practitioner, like someone who was
like a preacher.
Yeah, a reverend or a preacher or something like that. I guess I was going to say, well, it wouldn't have been a nun, I guess.
No.
Although I have known people that have left the order,
Yeah.
Kids that who had parents who had left the order.
Yeah.
But it seems that there's always 1 or 2 members of a family of super religious people who just for whatever reason, that isn't their path.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say anecdotally that a lot of times that manifests in sort of, I would say almost like an evangelical zeal for the opposite path.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be no more true than in this case.
Okay. Got cicadas in the background.
Oh, yeah, that's nice. That was nice that they just kind of came up right as I talked about that. Thank you, cicadas. Okay, so I'm going to read you. So I wrote out a little thing about it because I was like so inspired. And I said that, so while his dad was rarely home and he was out choosing to chase the devil out of Lutherans across the country, the devil takes up residence in the mind of his young son. So I'm going to read you this first reading because this is really like, this is so good.
Okay.
So this is, I think, a term, is this a religious term, a sestet, or is it just merely a poetical term for a formation of a certain...
I feel like this is a Brother Richard question because I do not know. I don't know.
Yeah, because I read something before about... Well, regardless. This is a rather long poem of which I'm going to just read you part 4. And This one is called Sestets. I love you more than death, your mournful head, your shrouding hair and your unfathomed eyes, and your white body beautiful, alas, priestess and victim in love's holy mass, your flesh that loves and loving ever dies. I could not love you more if you were dead.
Ooh.
Isn't that fantastic?
Ooh.
But to me, it reminded me, so what does that sound like to you? What is this line? Your flesh that loves and loving ever dies. What does that sound like?
That sounds very Poe.
Poe, or that is not dead which can eternal lie.
Oh, okay. Lovecraft.
And with strange eons, even death may die.
Yeah.
It's not coincidental that part of why we know about Park Barnitz is because of Lovecraft.
Oh, interesting.
So this is a letter that Lovecraft sent in September of 1932.
There's no racist commentary in this.
No, we're
we are dealing with Lovecraft. I just said.
Yeah. There's nothing. I wouldn't allow that. So we're just going to see Lovecraft.
That's a joke for people who know. Lovecraft was.
He had some issues.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
So he wrote this letter. I've just been showing him the Harris collection, where we dug up the work of 2 forgotten or semi-forgotten poets, Frederick Tuckerman and Park Barnitz, the latter a vivid decadent of the fin de siècle period who modeled his verse on Baudelaire and killed himself soon after graduation from Harvard. Not all of that is distinctly true.
Okay.
But that it helps to kind of inform the legend around him. And it is Lovecraft and Ligotti and all these people who really keep Park Barnitz's very meager legacy alive. So I didn't tell you too many facts about
No, I know very little.
his life. So he's born in 1878. He's part of his father's second brood of children. And he had a pretty normal childhood, and he was really steeped in religious education, obviously. And he had super like whip smart. Went to college at 15. He went to Midland College, which was a Lutheran-based college his father had helped to found, I think. He had a brief stint in Colorado, and then he was off to Harvard very young. And he became entranced with Eastern philosophy and became the youngest member of the Oriental Society there. There's a lot of references to like Asian concepts and what would have been termed Oriental at the time. He received his graduate degree at 21 from Harvard.
Wow. Graduate degree.
Degree at 21
Wow.
in 1899. And then he embarks on a set of poems which he publishes anonymously, which is called The Book of Jade. It was released in 1901, 600 numbered copies, of which he received 12. And there are letters back and forth, and also when you read in the newspaper articles surrounding the release of this, he was absolutely steadfast about keeping his anonymity. He really wanted it to be an anonymous work. And very shortly afterwards, and this is sort of the tragic thing that tends to happen to decadent poets, you know, like your Beardsley, he dies of what at the time is considered a heart ailment. There's some, like, Lovecraft insists that this is, you know, that he took his own life, but his family relates a story about a heart condition which his father supposedly had too. I don't know if this is
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
Like,
I mean,
is that, like, sometimes it's easier for a family to say,
like he had heart problems. He
Yeah.
just died suddenly. I don't know. And also, I don't want to be wildly speculative
Sure.
about stuff like, oh, he seems like the kind of guy that would do that, so that's probably what happened. Like, I mean,
we don't know.
we don't know. So both those things could be true. But I like to read a little bit of like the critical reaction to it, because I was reading these reviews in newspapers, and they're fantastic. Like the writing of even of the newspaper is fantastic.
oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so
So these are reviews of the Book of Jade
yeah, when no one knows who it is
that wrote it.
that wrote it, yeah. So it was from a private press called Doxies, where they were in San Francisco and then eventually New York at the Sign of the Lark. And they did a lot of stuff like different editions of like the Rubaiyat, which is something we collect, which is another thing that's odd that
Yeah.
collect different editions of the Rubaiyat.
Especially illustrated editions. Yeah.
Because they tend to be like the most fantastically illustrated things, and that's really like less so the poetry and the writing in it, but we always really like the illustrations.
Oh, the illustrations are usually fantastic. Yeah.
So this is a review, March 17th, 1901, from the St. Paul Globe. Doxies sends out from the well-known bookshop a volume of verse the like of which has never been ventured in this country. The decadents have had their poets, but it has remained for the author of the Book of Jade, whoever he may be, to claim recognition as their leader. His verse is oriental to a degree. It is redolent with strange perfumes. Occasionally it is lurid and fiery. Sometimes it is chill with the damp of death. It is always original. A first perusal will lead to a second, and it will then dawn on the reader that even Charles Baudelaire, the great French decadent to whom the book is dedicated, wrote nothing more unique. The question will undoubtedly be asked, who is the author? The publishers are only at liberty to state that he is an American and graduate of a leading American college. The book is gotten up in Doxie's best style and is in every way one of the oddest issued this year. We notice, moreover, that the edition is limited to 500 copies, each numbered. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
There's another one, though, that this is a line that's like a jumping off point for its own book. It's like something you want to just like, oh, wish I had written that. So this is from the Buffalo News. Doxies sent out from their unique printery, The Sign of the Lark, a little volume of queer verse under the title The Book of Jade. For readers who like the morbid in verse, this should be a veritable prize. It is decadent set in sonnet verse, and as gruesome stuff as ever a fading opium dream shadowed forth. It is so queer that it eludes every kind of characterization and language used for ordinary purposes. Death is about the most cheerful thing in it, and visions of mad crimes, adorned with bestial blazonings, glimmer through the murk at every turn. The author's name is reserved, but it is unimportant. Delirium tremens need not carry a card.
Ooh.
To the memory of Charles Baudelaire, this casket of sepulchral phosphorescence is dedicated. The edition is limited to 600 numbered copies, cloth-bound, $1.
Sepulchral phosphorescence.
I know, right? And delirium tremens need not carry a card.
Yeah.
I'm like, the reviews are just as good
I
as
know.
that.
Like those are these old newspaper articles are.
Yeah, like real writers,
Yeah.
like people with like, when you want to buy just on that review alone.
Absolutely. Yes.
There are occasional mentions of him. I did find where, especially at his old college, Midland College, where they do say that he is the author of it. So he's not entirely anonymous, but to the larger audience, he does remain anonymous. So it's released like in the spring, and by October he's dead, the same year.
Oh, wow.
So this is from the York Gazette, York, Pennsylvania. Word was received in this city yesterday of the death of Park Barnitz, eldest son of the Reverend S.B. Barnitz, formerly of York, at his home in Des Moines, Iowa, on Thursday. The death was a sudden one and was due to the heart trouble. I mean, he and his father, his father kind of alludes to being of like, I don't know, for lack of a better term, of a weak constitution, sickly as a child, and alludes to things relating to his heart and saying, like, I hope my heart holds out. And you don't really know if it's sort of like a romantic, I hope my heart.
Where's the line from Heavenly Creatures?
About like only the best people get diseases.
Yeah.
Cheer up. All the best people have bad chests and bone diseases. It's all frightfully romantic.
Is that true, Tim? Only the best people get diseases.
I mean, I may be biased.
His obituaries are just as lovely because people say like the most endearing things about him, which I think maybe in the spirit of appreciation for him, we should read a little bit of.
Sure, yeah.
This is from the competing York paper, the York Dispatch, which you can still read today. This is from...
For a price.
For a price, yeah. You can get one free article.
Yeah.
That's when you look up like what your neighbors are doing or which restaurants didn't pass the inspections. And then after that, you're like, oh, I really wanted to read this, but I'm not paying for it. So gone are the real actual newspapers.
I know.
I feel like if I was going to actually get subscribe to a newspaper, I want the physical copy.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
This is the York Dispatch, Thursday, October 17th, 1901. Death of Park Barnitz. He was a highly esteemed young man at Des Moines. Speaking of the death of David Park Barnitz, a former Yorker and son of the Reverend Samuel Barnitz, which was briefly chronicled in the Dispatch last week, contains the following particulars of the event. The many friends of Reverend Barnitz and family will deeply feel for them in the death of their eldest son, David Park, who was suddenly stricken on Thursday afternoon just after taking lunch with his sisters. Young Mr. Barnitz had been affected with enlargement of the heart, but unusually well this autumn up to the last Saturday night when he complained of severe pain. Tuesday he was much better, and Wednesday feeling so well that he told his mother to accompany Dr. Barnitz to the Synod and Missionary Convention at Iowa City. Wednesday evening he read for several hours, and Thursday breakfast with the family, seemingly quite better. After lunch he decided to rest, but after reaching the second story, fell, and in an instant life was extinct. Medical aid was summoned at once, but to no avail. He was born in Wheeling, West Virginia, June 24, 1878. In 1882, the family came to this city, and as a youth, this is from Des Moines. He attended the public schools, and at the age of 15, entered Midland College of the Lutheran Church at Atchison, Kansas, and soon developed more than an ordinary talent in line of language and literature. These were his specialties. In 1897, he graduated at Midland, and a few months later entered Harvard University, where he received the degree of A.B. in 1898 and the degree of A.M. in 1899. He had been at home since that time doing literary work, and last year published a volume of poems anonymously, which was spoken of as of unusual poetic merit. He was a member of the American Oriental Society at the age of 20, the youngest member ever admitted, and Mr. Barnitz was very reticent, went into company but little, but was a daily prominent figure at the libraries. He detested shams of every kind, and in some of his criticisms would have been regarded severe. His tall, erect presence will be missed at the libraries and on the streets. Mr. Barnitz was devoted to his parents, sisters, and brother, and was what is often termed a homeboy. The family are bowed down with grief, but know the source of comfort. Public funeral services were held at the family residence. Everything in connection with the obsequies was simple in character, in accordance with the well-known wishes of the family and views of the deceased. He was dressed in the college gown appropriate to the degree of AM, which, like at Harvard, they switch it around to the Master of Arts. Reverend John A. Wirt, pastor of the Lutheran Church, conducted the services. So I was like, man.
That doesn't sound like a suicide. It sounds like,
Like
he really did have a heart problem. There's too much detail in there. I think if it was a suicide, they wouldn't have that detail of him going upstairs and stuff. And
Yeah, and and so you have to wonder, like so much of his poetry really did sort of presage death at a young age. Like, was he somehow sort of like in a paranormal sort of way aware of what was coming?
Yeah, I mean,
and that sort of informed the rest of his whole very short life.
We always say, time doesn't apply to the other.
Yeah, did he know this? Could he feel this on the horizon, and that,
echoes of the future, in a sense, inform things sometimes, I think.
This is a poem of his called Changelessness. When death shall touch thy body beautiful, and thou, that art of all the earth most fair, shalt close thine eyes upon the shining air, an unadorned gold urn to make full, what that thou liest quietly inurned, in the dark bosom of the earth divine, being turned into a heap of ashes fine, for the love of whose white face all men have burned. Then in the earth, O beautiful white love, thy beauty shall not wholly end and cease, when that thou art gone to endless peace. Though all things beneath the sky above fade away, it knoweth not to die, but abideth changeless endlessly.
He is possessed of some talent.
Yeah,
sure.
It's amazing. And the thing is,
I think, look, I like Lovecraft.
Yeah.
But comparing him to Lovecraft, it should be the other way around. I should compare Lovecraft to him.
Well, yeah, and true, he is his senior, really. So,
yeah, I mean, you can tell that's wordcraft,
it's funny because his dad is so devoutly religious, and he talks over and over again about just that isn't his thing. He talks about opium and occult goddesses, and this one's called Ashtoreth, which is that a start? You have to give me a little background there, because that's where some of my knowledge falls away.
Yeah, I guess a Middle Eastern goddess, pre-Christian.
Which makes sense, because he was studying with a very famous, at the time would have been called Oriental scholar, who took him under his wing, and that's who actually helped him get into the Oriental Society earlier. So he's really steeped in that kind of mythos, which is part of the whole decadent movement. They just, they just want this, it really is all decadence. It's like opium and death and all the. If he lived in my neighborhood when I was 16,
I might not be married to you.
Yeah. I would just, I would have driven, well, not in a car because I didn't have my license, but I would have, no, I don't really like to walk. I would have, I don't know how to roller skate, so it's not going to be a Melanie moment.
Asked your mom to drive you there?
I would have written him letters.
Well, I'm glad I received those letters.
Yeah. So this one's pretty cool.
Yeah,
though.
Please do.
Okay. In thy blue pallid gown that shimmereth, so pale thou standest in the wan moonlight, where the gold censer near the body white wraps thee around with its perfumed breath. So wan thy high tiara glimmereth above the mystical far eyes of light. Thou seemest some dead goddess of the night, O starry love, O changeless Ashtoreth. Pallid thou standest in thy divinity, like some moon idol of the buried time, before whose face priests sing in solemn chime. So I prostrate before thy deity. Unto thy face have solemn praises sung, and in my hands a gold censer swung. That's part of the church, right? Isn't the censer
Yeah, but I mean, it would have been in religions too. I mean,
anything you could put incense in, right?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Any cultural aspect. Where
so it would have been used in Eastern religions too.
Oh, okay. But isn't that
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It literally paints a picture. I can see he didn't do this, but I could see the Edmund Dulac illustration of that. Literally in my head.
Yeah.
As you're reading it.
And I the prelude to this is I am a little tired of all things mortal. That's the first line.
Ooh.
I see through half-shut eyelids, languorous, the old monotonous gold sun set slowly through the western portal, where I recline upon my deep divan in Ispahan. It's just it's very Kubla Khan, very it's. And
500 copies of this originally. Were there more copies printed at the time? Do you know? Future.
There was supposed to be a second autographed copy of it, but it also corresponds with like the end of this publisher's solvency. So
Okay.
it looks as if this might have been the last. He did like Doxies did a version of the Rubaiyat with this illustrator Florence. I forget what it is, but she's beautiful stuff around this time. Was trying to revive it, but it seemed like it all just kind of fell apart at this point too. Like, and because he's so young, and like when you're this age and you're really steeped in just like kind of, maybe it's too much of me seeing myself in it, but you're sort of wrapped in this sort of in someone else's language and culture, just because it seems just more fascinating than your own.
Oh yeah. I think it's I don't want to call it a phase, but it's something that people go through. Like I certainly did.
Yeah, where you like it's much easier to be some fantastical version of yourself in a different place in a different time than it is to be in your, like the sad kid that's at home with his parents going to the library for fun, So I wonder what would have happened if he had been allowed to have a longer life and maybe even, I don't want to say mature, but just change from this sort of aesthetic into like, if he had written, like imagine what the fiction would have been like.
Right, yeah. Yeah, there's real talent there. Like, that's really, really good stuff.
Well, the other thing about it is that, like, I've read more about the family. Like, okay, I did a family tree, and then I read...
Of course you did.
And, well, I wanted to see if he got back to, like, sort of... There were some people related to the abolitionist movement. I wanted to see if he was related to it. And then I also had to look in my dad's ridiculously large genealogical tree that, like, anybody that's ever stepped foot in New York County is probably on it. And his great-grandmother was on it, so I had to, like, finish it down until I got to...
Are you related?
Well,
distantly?
In the most distant way.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that, like, I'm going to be the first heir to anything that's left of the...
No, but it's cool to make those connections.
It is, and it was like, I don't know. I forget what the association was. It wasn't super close. It's not as close as, like, as Rachel Bond, my version of York's Emily Dickinson.
Yeah, did we ever do the show on Rachel Bond?
I think we did, but I can't remember.
I don't know if we just talked about it, or someone please let us know if we did the show on Rachel Bond so we don't have to go back through 400 and some episodes, because we mean to do a show on her. I don't think we did. I think we talked about doing a show on her.
So she's York's, like, invalid poet who wrote these sad religious stories from her bed that she never left from the time she was a teenager till the time she died, and sold pictures of herself in bed.
In Helm too, right?
Yeah, she lived in Helm.
Yeah, and Toad Road connection.
And right near, basically her house would have been close to when we did the episode about Dr. Crandall's health school and...
connection coming up to that.
And the cop's baby's friend thing. Yeah, she would have lived right around that area.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a real full circle, dark, decadent, tragic poet kind of vibe.
I don't think we did the episode on Rachel Bond. I think we did because we're so familiar with the story and we've talked about doing it so much that we kind of think we did it. But I don't think that we did. But can someone please let us know if we've done the episode on Rachel Bond?
Yeah, and I don't want to, like... I know, like, poetry isn't everybody's cup of tea, like, I
feel
like a lot of people age out of it.
It's still the story of someone's life and the history and everything else. I think...
Yeah, apparently that he had a relative who was quite a famous medical student who was a pharmacist who had sort of the same turn of mind, and, like, things went, like, kind of badly for him. But his brother was, like, amazingly successful. He was, like, he went off to school, he went to Penn, he was part of Skull and Bones, which I thought was only at Yale.
Yeah, me too.
So maybe he went later on.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know if it's like an inter...
I do not know the answer to that.
Yeah, I'm not
So do you know the history of the publication of the Book of Jade, like the different editions? Like, do you know, did they do a new edition around the time of Lovecraft, or did they?
No, they had gotten copies from, I think, the Lovecraft one. It makes it seem like... So the Harris collection I looked up is part of Brown University, which makes sense because Brown's in Providence.
Sure.
So they probably would have been looking for these decadent poets and trips to the
came
library.
Across like an original there.
But there are originals in a lot of the famous libraries. So at the time, they must have been collected like at Yale's library, and then several other like major library collections have them. So out of the 600 copies, like a lot of them are already have been accounted for. There is one online right now that's for sale, the numbered copy, but
Very expensive, I assume.
yeah.
Well, we'll keep our eye out.
Yeah. Yeah, like that's the thing. Like maybe like somewhere there was one sitting in a pile of
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you never know.
yeah.
You never know. But there is an edition that people can buy now, the Book
Yeah,
of Jade.
this is from like Hippocampus Press, and I will say this that I was trying to get a hold of both of the people that helped with the compilation of this, just because I learned from the last episode we did that you should probably do more research. Like, okay, so the episode we did on Olive Oatman, the author of a more recent book about her, contacted me. She's going to be on the show.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. It
Fairly
sounds super
soon.
fascinating.
Her book is like what I should have read, and she tells the true story, and we're going to talk about that in relation to her other book, which talks about women and tattooing. So
Okay, yeah, that's going to be a cool show.
but I wanted to reach out to them because they're the ones that really did all this work, and I did a fair amount of like just work on my own to come up with a family genealogy and like clipping different things that were said in the newspaper about them, not all of which I even read, but they have a much more academic and obviously have spent a huge amount of time researching, and then they include some things. I think they include I don't know if they include some of the parts from, there's separate entries by famous like contemporary horror weird fiction writers in the dirt row. I think Ligotti writes something about it, and so he's sort of like the unsung hero of, and all because of religiosity in York. And
Well,
well, I do feel like there is a current in Pennsylvania Dutch culture because it is derived from so much, like insular German, of that there is a darkness there, and sometimes it manifests in this like Lutheranism, and sometimes it manifests in decadent poetry, and you don't really know which way that's going to land.
we got a show coming up that'll address the sort of early Pennsylvania Lutherans and Pietists and Quakers and their involvement with the paranormal. And it's really, really interesting show we got coming up on that as well. Another author we'll be talking to.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to go with a full circle, this kind of goes back to even the first episode, and that sort of, Nelson Rehmeyer, Pennsylvania Dutch hexman, was too damn peculiar to live with.
Yeah.
And there is to me, like a dark kind of melancholic beauty to this culture that goes a little bit unspoken of, because so much of it is like there's so much pragmatism and work ethic involved in it that becomes the overarching kind of thing. But secondarily to that is, I think, a real sense of sort of pessimism and foreboding about the world that I don't see in so much in other cultures.
The fact that the Pennsylvania Dutch language survived, I think, helps a lot for the culture to survive with it. And I was talking to someone about this recently, that we have, in one folkloric figure here, the only expression of Odin in the New World. We have, in the Belsnickel, to my knowledge, the only expression of the European wild man in America. We have that as the Belsnickel here. These deep traditions have survived because of the language, I think, because of the stubbornness of the culture.
And because it's not something, it's not an outsider loving culture.
Yeah.
I'll say it that.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think it's sort of like, I don't think it's a hatred for people that are outsiders. I think it's like indifference. Like, why would you? You have your own people that you have to keep your head down and keep working. Like, why would you ask somebody to come?
Why would you invite someone over to your house?
That's your own space, Tim.
All right. The name of the author again is?
David Park Barnitz, and his book was The Book of Jade. There's a new edition by Hippocampus Press that's readily found.
All right.
And it's a inexpensive romp.
All right. Thank you, Allison, for your research.
You're quite welcome.
All right, we're going to return to York once again here, Allison, for our Curiosity of the Week. And you actually made a reference to this before. And this is actually a bottle of the aforementioned cop's baby's friend.
Part of a lawsuit and actually legislation involving quack medicine.
Mm-hmm. The early 1900s.
In the
right?
early 1900s. One of the many soothing syrups that soothed babies so much they didn't often wake up.
So Kopp would have built the mansion that became
Dr. Crandall's health school.
Dr. Crandall's health school, which ended up burning down. And it's somewhere near Toad Road. It's like as the crow flies, not too far away.
Which helps inform what other people thought of as the true legend of
Right.
Toad
I
Road.
believe that fire of that place, because it was called an asylum at some point. Now, asylums back then were any place of medical rest.
Yeah, this was more like a health sanatorium.
Kind of like an old folks home almost by the time it burnt down, I think. But I think it was enough where somebody's like, oh, yeah, an asylum burnt down somewhere in Pelham. And then it gets like twisted into the
Yeah,
Toad
there's
Road
just
legend.
like almost like different generations of like, so when you like urban legends and these things sort of have like generational, like because kids grow up and go to certain places at certain times and like it's informed by what's happening in the world at that point in time. And like if you're 16 in 1976, that's totally different than being 16 15 years later than that or 30 years later than that, you know, because it's a different time period. People are doing things at different times. Like culturally we're shifting.
And it's so neat because like talking to people who went to high school in Columbia, the place they went to go to experience spooky stuff wasn't Toad Road. It's what we now call Site 7.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they went there. And that's, in fact, that's why I first went there, because I had these stories of
people saying odd things.
Yes, like weird lights and quote unquote people with albinism chasing them through the woods. And
apparently, like we talked to one of our friends who's a historian over there, and there was a family of people with albinism there, right?
I mean, supposedly there was somebody who lived right there at Site 7 with this. I've never been able to prove that.
Yeah.
But the fact that we have so many white things at Site 7.
Oh, yeah, and even quite recently, there was like a white stag site.
Albino deer, yeah. We have photos of it. Yeah, and like reports of like hobos in the woods that were throwing rocks at people. And I said, have you ever seen these hobos? Well, no. It's like, okay, then you just have a Class B Bigfoot thing and or a poltergeist, however you want to look at it.
Alba Twitch kind of.
Yeah, exactly. But that's where like the people from Columbia went there. They didn't go to Toad Road, even though it wouldn't have been that much further away for them to go to that. But that's where they went, you know, to experience
because
spooky
I
stuff.
lived more in the southern part of the county.
It was Hex Hollow.
It was Hex Hollow.
Yeah.
Which sometimes people would refer to as the Seven Gates of Hell because
yeah.
they heard about that and conflated those two things.
Well, I mean, in my book, I assert that the original place for the Seven Gates was either, again, Prospect Hill Cemetery, to mention that once more, or Hex Hollow. That's the two places I heard about it when I first started hanging out up here. It was not associated with Toad Road. And then later with the internet and Weird Pennsylvania and all that, it becomes associated with that. But in any case, we have an actual bottle, empty,
yeah, I drank it all so we can be able to put it through the mail.
of some cop's baby's friend. Stamped York, Pennsylvania, USA. So this would have been it was like opium laced, wasn't it? Like,
yeah, let me pull up what exactly was in it.
Okay,
because, it shouldn't have a hard time getting anybody to sleep.
yeah.
Okay, here's a little article about when they seized baby medicine.
Okay.
2,346 bottles of Cop's Baby's Friend was confiscated by the United States government yesterday. This is in 1915. The government charges the medicine, which is recommended for teething babies, is 8.82% alcohol and 1/8 of a grain of morphine sulfate to a fluid ounce.
Okay.
The government will prosecute the firm for violation of the Food and Drug Act. It's charged that the ingredients of the soothing syrup help to increase the infant mortality rate, and large quantities of this medicine were found in the possession of the following firms: Fuller Morrison, Peter Van Schack & Sons, and the Humiston Keeling Company. Pre-1915.
Definitely would put your baby to sleep, maybe in a way you didn't want.
Yeah, I think it might do that for anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the curiosity of the week. It'll be this bottle. It has a connection to my book, Beyond the Seventh Gate, to Toad Road, to Strange Familiars, the episodes we did, and to quack medicine and
We did,
history and all that stuff. It's actually stamped on the bottle. It says Mrs. J.A. Kopp, Kopp's baby's friend, York, Pennsylvania, USA. So it is, without a doubt, one of the original bottles. I'll take a photo of that and I'll put it in the show notes. And if you click on that, it'll take you to our Etsy shop where you can purchase that bottle and other curiosities of the week, those that are left. Also at Etsy, we have copies of my books. If you get them from us on Etsy, they come signed by me.
Not just some random person.
We have Strange Familiars t-shirts, stickers, patches, mugs, all that great stuff. Artwork, originals and prints up there. Allison has various ephemera up there. I got some old photos. Might be listing some more cool owls up there and stuff. So make sure to check out our Etsy shop. Once again, the shop name is Lost Grave, but if you type in Strange Familiars, our stuff should come up. I guess that's it for this week. We'll be back soon with more Strange Familiars. Strange Familiars is a production of Dark Color Arts. Intro and background music is by Stone Breath. If you want to hear more or purchase music, you can go to stonebreath.bandcamp.com. Strange Familiars is on Instagram, @StrangeFamiliars, one word, no underscore. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/StrangeFamiliars. You can join the Strange Familiars gathering group there. If you're looking for Strange Familiars merch, the only place to go to see official Strange Familiars merch is strangefamiliars.com/merch. There'll be photos of our merch there. You can click on them. It'll take you right to our Etsy shop where you can purchase them. And strangefamiliars.com is open all the time.
sun gone down, darkness beyond me, my rest a stone. Yet in my dreams I'll be nearer, my God, to thee, nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee. Then let the way appear, steps unto heaven, and all that thou sendest me in mercy given. Angels to beckon me nearer, my God, to thee, nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee. Then with my waking thoughts bright with thy praise, out of my stony griefs Bethel I will raise. So by my woes to be nearer, my God, to thee, nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee. Oh, if unjoyful wing cleaving the sky, sun, moon, and stars forgot, upward I will fly. Still, oh, my song shall be nearer, my God, to thee, nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee.